Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Mythos Busters, where tonight pants are an opt-in affair. So rather than our normal hi or hello, I'm going to ask each of my fellow cohorts to introduce themselves as to whether they are opting in or opting out. So tonight we've got Nick.
Whose pants are we opting into? Our own? Because if it's our own, I'm a maybe.
Asking the right question.
And we also have Ian.
Hello. I guess I'm opting in? I don't know why I sound so
if we hear a
questioning about that.
See, you're very pants conflicted right now, but that's okay.
I would say if we hear a quick shuffle, we know you're pulling the pants off like as soon as he asks the question. So.
And rounding out the team tonight, we've got Scat.
Well, I'm wearing what some people refer to as short pants, so I guess I'm riding the fence.
Oh, I see. All right, well, we'll get you to pick a side at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the subtext, I'll let everyone discern what side I fall on. So tonight, we have, God, it is, like, I feel like we were just talking about this off air, but it feels like it's been forever since we've actually recorded an episode, because we did the new player episode. It was a little bit more focused. It wasn't quite as, I guess, normal for our normal flow. So it's awesome to be back in the saddle. We've got our normal community. What is wrong with the term back in the saddle?
It's just awkward. No saddles involved.
Well,
okay, saddles are also an opt-in.
I opt out. I'm right
You
out of
don't
the
know what
saddle.
Sean has. You don't know Sean's set up right now. Just no pants in a saddle.
Are assless chaps pants?
Yes, no.
Okay.
So we've got tonight our normal community highlights. We've got our swath of news. And tonight's discussion topic, we're going to talk about that thing that FFG kind of scooped us on a little bit. It's the podcast curse. When we record, they immediately release an article the next day, and when we choose a discussion topic, they release an article discussing said discussion topic the day prior. So we're going to talk about the philosophy of upgrading your deck. All things victory points, and I suppose ultimately that means all things XP. So guys, let's hop right into it. Nick,
Hi.
What's been going on around the community?
Well, with the community-related stuff, first off, I want to say that we have had a little bit of a drought of guest articles, and I know I said that once our guest articles started to subside a little bit, I would write an article or two myself. Well, I'm guilty of not having done that yet, so if anybody has anything they want to say about Arkham as a game, if they have any articles that they want to add to our awesome list of guest-provided articles that we already have going, please do so. And check out mythosbusters.wordpress.com if you have any questions or concerns, or you can just get a hold of one of us on Discord and we can let you know about that. I haven't had the chance, also, this is just the episode of Nick Hasn't Done X, but I haven't had the chance to play any new...
Except for put on pants.
Well, yeah, that's, yeah. I don't have a good response. Anyway, I haven't had the chance to play a fan-made scenario since the move into the apartment yet. My printer actually isn't even hooked up, so I'd have to do it all online. Anyway, what I have been able to do is check out some house rules. So I figured I would add that to the community highlights and talk about some house rules that Sean and I used during our last 4-player game. We used it for a few games. This specific house rule is about investigator signature cards. Now, the argument for this house rule is that you can play multiple games in a row and never see the signature card for your investigator. Obviously, that's something that is...
No. I think we need to modify that. It is, you will play multiple games in a row
and
never see.
That's very true, especially with us. It seems like they just don't come up when we need them or when we want them or ever. But this house rule was put into effect to kind of remedy that and to make it feel a little bit more like you're playing Rex or you're playing Roland or something like that. And the way they do it is you start with your regular hand of 5 cards, but one of those 5 is your signature card. And then the way they balance that is you cannot mulligan unless you have the weaknesses in your hand. Then you mulligan those away like normal, but everything else you're stuck with. So you're setting up your starting hand, you're setting up one of the 5 cards, but then you're forced to stick with the other 4. I did that. I was playing as Zoe, and I did that for, I think, 3 games in a row, and it didn't feel like crazy overpowered. Like we were still, like really struggling to succeed or to overcome certain parts of certain scenarios. So it didn't really skew the power level in any huge way, which was a bit of a relief. I don't do that like by default. I don't do this house rule by default, but it is something interesting to try out to get a little bit more of an idea of, okay, I want to feel what this investigator is like from the word go. I don't want to just hopefully happen into that signature card. So it's something to consider. And that I got from BoardGameGeek.com under the variants section. There's a lot of house rules, and I'll have some more. Hopefully I'll be able to actually test and try out. But I'll be providing some more as we go on with future episodes as well.
Yeah, that one in particular I was very interested to try because, yeah, some of those signatures, like, it makes a big difference to your investigator. Like, let's say, like, Jim in particular is just a completely different investigator when you can reliably get his trumpet out. But I was playing Daisy, and it turns out there's really not enough tomes in the pool to make it worth it. So I just played by regular rules. I did it the first game, and I'm like, oh, great, I have her bag here that I'm probably never actually going to play. Okay.
I feel like Zoe's a pretty strong one for that. Like her cross.
And it's
insane.
And the funny thing is that I have played with Zoe's Cross so few times before that there were plenty of times when I would engage with a whippoorwill and forget that I could just off it. Like, I forgot what the cross did and how it worked because I had barely had it before that. So there were plenty of times when Sean had to remind me, and you're going to kill that, right? Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm gonna kill it. So...
Yeah.
No, I think it went more like, nah, come get this whippoorwill. It's bumming me out.
Oh god, the whippoorwills.
I like walking into an empty location with a cross, look at an acolyte, and it just drops dead. Just keep moving.
Pretty much, yeah.
I think there's a special place in hell for whippoorwills and night gaunts. Like, they both go to the same place. For different reasons.
Speaking of, well, and that's what's fun about, I think, Blood on the Altar, where the two worlds converge. Oh my god, I fell into the whipper whirlpool the other night, where I had one out, and I let it sit there for longer than I should have. You should always kill whippoorwills. At the expense of other things. Kill whippoorwills. I didn't do it. I've coached myself. I've told myself that's how it needs to be, because I've gotten burned before. Didn't do it. Sure enough, another whippoorwill shows up, and a night gone after that, and it's like, oh, well, this location just sucks right now.
Or you could do like Schizo Tool did last night and try to kill the whippoorwill and draw 2 tentacles in a row.
Oh, jeez.
That was, yeah. That's my B-team campaign, which they're kind of like the 2 stooges. They find ways to mess up even like the sure things.
Oh, boy.
All right. Anyway, I'm sure I interrupted you from saying something.
No,
useful.
that's.
Oh yeah, the house rule. I think your mileage varies on the investigator, but I didn't think it skewed the power balance of the game.
Right.
Notably.
And that was the concern. I mean, anytime you have a game that is very specific about its starting hand rules, as most games are, and then you alter that, like, you're worried about power balance because that's something from the minute you start the game. Like, you really can't work your way around it too much. But it's good to see that it didn't have any long-lasting effects on the difficulty of the scenarios.
Well, and taking away the mulligan too. Like,
yeah.
You
Right.
get an awesome card, but then you might just get 4 crap cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good balance.
Yeah. I'm usually not a very house ruley guy, but I like this one because I think it is balanced. Because the mulligan is like, how often do you just keep your opening hand? Usually the mulligan is so key, so I think it works out.
Mm-hmm. And additionally, one thing that we've talked about in the past was there should be a website or a central place that exists where fan-made scenarios can all kind of come together and exist as a kind of a one-stop shop for fan-made scenarios for Arkham. Well,
I think we even talked about taking that on ourselves.
We considered it, yeah, but someone beat us to it, and this was recent news as of when these show notes were written, so like 3 weeks ago. but it's kind of been around for a little while now. But the Arkham Central website, arkhamcentral.com, I believe is the URL, is a place where someone is taking fan-made scenarios from BoardGameGeek.com and putting them on Arkham Central. And not only that, but there's like a user rating and review system going on as well. So if you play a scenario and you're like, this one was really good except for one minor thing that didn't feel right, you can write a review of that scenario on Arkham Central. And you can give it a star rating, I believe, and that sort of thing. So not only is it a central place for you to get scenarios, but you can read a bit more into what other people thought and get an idea for what to expect when and if you try out those scenarios yourself.
Well, and it's a cool place to get feedback, too, if you're developing
Definitely.
them. Because if someone's got, if you see consistent gripes on your custom scenario, then, well, maybe V2 should be on the way.
Yeah, definitely great for both the user and the developer.
Great tool.
And then other than that, we have a new aspect of the Mythos Busters podcast, which, I was just going to throw it over to you, Sean, but there you go.
I'm sorry. I totally missed the segue that I should have picked up on because it came so quickly. I'm so excited about this because it's got a lot of potential, and I'm counting on you guys to help us make this happen. So, props to Casey that we met at Arkham Knights, or Mr. Trench, as you may know him in Discord. I'm gonna give him this one prop because this was originally his idea that we're implementing, and then I'm gonna go back to pretending it was our original idea, and we're gonna take all the credit. But what we have done is we've established the Mythos Busters hotline. So this is hopefully a really cool tool for people to interact with the podcast. So if you've got a comment, just want to throw in on the podcast on something we said, if you've got a question that maybe you want us to answer on the podcast, or if you just want to throw some shade our way because, we were mean to Knife, then you can call this line. It goes straight to our custom voicemail, and we can lift the file out to actually insert in the podcast. So the idea here is to make this kind of a little bit more collaborative and communicative, and hopefully, most, if not all, of the calls we receive can actually be played on the podcast proper, whether or not we just tag them on the end because they're a comment, or whether we maybe even frame the discussion around a good question that was asked. So please, if you've ever thought of any of those things, call in, leave your comment, leave your question, leave your rage. Call us at 203-493-MYTH. That's 203-493-6984.
I can't wait until we get a message from Johnny Knife about how much he hates our review of Knife.
Johnny Knife.
And Ransom, there is a 3-minute limit on the message, too, just to give people...
Yeah, so don't go crazy, guys.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so I did leave some guidelines on our outgoing message, so, try to keep it somewhat concise. If you need to call back and leave multiples, you better make it good. So yes, super excited about how this could work out. So please, please, please don't hesitate to call, even if it's a stupid comment or question. That doesn't exist at this point, so call in.
Yeah, we make a lot of those on the show anyways, so it'll fit right in.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Okay, on to news. Speaking of new stuff for Mythos Busters, I'm going to be, because I work shift work and I have lots of time, sometimes free during the middle of the week, when no one else is around because you guys all work 9 to 5, I'm going to start doing some, I guess, twitching, casting, playing games on Octagon, on our...
I think the kids would call that twitching.
Okay,
Scott.
twitching.
Streaming?
Okay, yeah. Streaming? Twitch? Anyways, I'm going to be playing games of Octagon, on Octagon of Arkham.
This is
going
great.
so
Yeah,
poorly. And once I give them the title, so I'll be streaming those on Twitch, and I'll do it in the live podcast chat. No, I'll do it on Twitch, and then you guys can chat and everything like that. And it's going to be Scott's Arkham solo series. A Mythos Buster production, or Scott's Ass for short, or Sass
if you prefer.
Whatever you want. So
I prefer Scott's Ass.
it is going to be incredibly irregular. I might do like 4 hours one day. And
So what you're
Scott's
saying
ass is incredibly
is
irregular.
incredibly irregular. I think they make some products for that.
it's just randomly out of the blue. You'll just be like, "Oh, this is happening right now. So I'll try to give people some warning if give you some warning if it's going to happen. But yeah, if you are free during the day, come watch my ass.
And it depends on whether you can make it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you can make it there in time. You might miss it, and that's sad, but we all move on.
Okay,
Yeah.
innuendos aside, though, I think the idea is to post these all to our YouTube
Yes.
as well. So even if you can't make it on the day, they'll be on our YouTube channel to watch afterward. We'll actually get some more gameplay videos out there because our ability to make new ones has been very, very limited.
Yeah. And if you guys have deck ideas or stuff you want to see me try out with my ass, feel free to email
Don't
ideas.
commit to anything that you're not prepared
Or
to follow up on.
Or call them myth.
Well, I'm just like, I'm not saying I'm going to take everyone's suggestion, but if you're like, hey, I found this deck, it's really cool, nice combo, I'd be like, okay,
I meant
why
about
not?
playing
Sure.
them with your ass. That's all I was getting at.
Well, it's my Arkham Solo series, so I'm gonna do stuff with my ass. Like, come on. Also, I'm open to other things. Okay, so
I think we might have to put those behind a paywall. So
oh boy,
Like, I don't even think you're trying for half these innuendos at this point.
We have
I don't think one of those was
hit like a
intentional.
critical mass. Like, this is crazy.
yeah, stuff is just falling out of this ass stuff.
I love the idea of someone listening to this after our somewhat serious new player episode.
Or if this is your first episode,
Yeah.
just buckle down because it's going to get worse.
My ass is a wild ride. So moving on to FFG news, which has a lot less innuendo. We got a few articles. There's the Science or Seance article talking about Undimension Unseen. Obviously, it's out now, so there's an article about it. Feel free to read it. I don't really have anything to say because
The word seance always trips me out because it's like my name that someone misspelled.
Yeah, I can see that.
Sounds
yeah.
rough.
Chauncey.
or if you're doing like cross-dressing, it looks like a female-ish
Fiancé.
fiancé, like or what's that Rocky Horror Picture Show? Unnamed Fiancé 1.
Oh my god. So on to news we care about.
Yeah. An article called "Make Your Peace," which is a preview of Where Doom Awaits, which is the next pack coming out, number 5 Mythos pack, which is the number 6th quest because Dunwich was 1A and 1B. And we got to see, well, we kind of already saw I Had Worse is one of the cards they show there. But Moment of Respite is a neutral event that they previewed here. 3 cost, 3 XP, with 2 willpower pips. It has a spirit trait, and play only if there are no enemies at your location. And it's heal 3 horror and draw a card.
Very nice.
That's good.
Oh, all the Agnes
It's
toys.
so
Yeah,
good.
that's an Agnes toy for sure.
All
See, and
the
I saw
Agnes
this
toys.
as a Roland toy immediately. Of course I did.
Or a Skids
Or
toy.
a Skids toy, yeah. But simply because Roland, that's one thing that I'm very conscious of, obviously, with him is horror. And, yeah. But I can see how Agnes would benefit from this, I guess. Sure.
I mean, let's be fair. I don't think there's any non-survivor investigator out there who doesn't
Right.
care about horror. So
And I'm finding as we're getting into the late stages of the campaign, I'm running into sanity trouble more and more, just because I don't know if the scenarios are increasing the pressure, which I think they are, but also just if you have 1 or 2 points of mental trauma going by this point, then something like this, I'm definitely going to consider upgrading for some of my investigators.
Well, and not only that, but the number of tools that remove horror is, if I remember right, it's notably smaller than the number of tools we have that remove damage. So having something that does it in a huge swing like this and also replaces itself by drawing a card, that's hard to pass up with any investigator.
Yeah, I like the burst healing. I've talked about this before, but just the idea of one and done.
Yes.
You know, just play it once, takes up one action instead of like little piddly drops, like one action for one horror,
Right.
one action for one horror. Like, I'd rather just get it over with. And the fact that it replaces itself, it's good.
Because enjoying things in moderation is for sissies.
Moderation.
Yeah, decent cost too, I think. 3. And the willpower pips are nice too. So I mean, even if you're not low on sanity, it might help you pass one of, like in Skids or Roland, help you pass one of those willpower tests off the top of the deck that would deal you horror. So
Yeah, I think the 3 experience is the biggest piece here, because that's
3
that's not
experience is a
nothing.
lot for an event, for something that you're going to use once and once a game maybe. But otherwise, I mean, I still would argue that it's balanced.
yeah, and I mean, you're only going to use it maybe once a game, but it's also going to stop you from going insane, probably. Like,
Well, and not only that, but
Is
the
there-
neutral cards, like the higher level neutral cards, tend to be like one or two more experience than what you would expect to see on a similar card for a class. Like if this were a Mystic card, then it would probably only be 1 or 2 experience. But because anybody literally can take it, 3 seems to fit.
yeah, or 3 XP and like
Sure.
2 cost or something. Yeah, it's slightly worse than a class card, totally, but.
Is the Elder Sign 3 XP or 2 XP?
3.
I think it's 3.
Elder Sign
right?
Amulet
Yeah,
and
so
the
it's the
Bulletproof Vest are
Yeah.
both 3.
So that one is one more point of like soaking horror, but you don't get to draw a card, I guess, is the difference.
Also takes up a body slot.
And takes the ever important body slot.
Well,
Hey man,
Hey, we'll get there.
when you run leather coat,
Well, the Elder Sign is
yeah,
accessory slot,
which I think
right?
is
So that's
Oh, yes,
probably
yes,
more
sorry.
contested than the body. Well, it is. I think it is more contested.
yeah.
Seems like
Very
a cool
much.
card, though. People will play it.
The last article, which Sean alluded to, where FFG totally scooped us on this whole conversation, is That Which Does Not Kill Us, or Doesn't Kill Us. And it's a big article about leveling up, and kind of has some of the theory about what they were trying to come across with as far as this being an RPG-esque thing, and some of the little strategies that they recommend. We get a level 3 Aquina shown, and basically the only difference is she's 3 XP and 4 cost instead of 5 XP and 1 cost. And all her stats and text are the same. And then
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Aside, no one wants Aquina to be good more than me. But is she not worse at 3 XP, even if the cost is reduced?
well, you look at Leo, and it only costs 1 XP to reduce him by 1 cost, but she takes 2 XP to reduce her by 1 cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess technically if you've already upgraded to level 1 Aquina, this only costs you 2 to upgrade to level 3, right? If you're replacing the card by name.
I guess.
But I want her to
Yeah,
be
I
good,
think we
guys.
I think we
really,
wanted
really
to
do.
see
I
more
really do.
more variance or some sort of change to her ability rather than a change to her cost. I think is what we were really hoping for.
Yeah, I wanted a static stat
Sure.
boost or something.
Mm-hmm.
A bigger pool of health or sanity. I don't know.
Okay, hold on for a second, because am I seeing things? But the original Aquina is deal that damage to another enemy, and this one reads deal that damage to any enemy. So couldn't you deal it to the same
Whoa!
enemy?
Okay, no, I take it
Yeah.
back. That's good.
Yep. Redacted.
I was like, am I taking crazy pills? Or...
I completely glossed over that the first 3 times I read this too.
Wow.
Okay, Matt, I'm sorry.
RTFC noob. Okay, wow.
I've made a career out of reading 70% of cards and leaving out exactly the relevant part.
Yeah. Well, it's it's one word difference. So
yeah,
I'm looking
any
through this, I'm like,
versus another.
And I'm looking at the two cards, and I'm like, they look identical, the same, like the text formatting, even
Right,
like where
yeah.
words are on the cards. So yeah, I totally.
Okay, full stop.
Yep.
So scratch the record back. Hey guys, Quina's now good, and I want her to be good, like I may have mentioned at some point in the past in an alternate universe. Okay, so yeah, that's what you want her to do, because now
Yeah.
she's playable in solo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I still think you run into the bit of a problem that Survivor has a really good ally already, but that is pretty attractive. Like, if you think about some of those enemies that deal 2 damage and then only have 2 health, that's like, oh, see ya, I'll move, get that opportunity attack, and kill you at the same time.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Wow, this is actually really good. Oh, and she gains a agility pip as well.
Oh, sure, the skill icon, yeah.
Yeah, which, I mean, is
Meh.
negligible, I think. Yeah. Well, yeah,
Okay.
that is...
From now on, Aquina shall be the remembered daughter, because we've all
Yeah, and
we've
it's
all
obvious
read
we
the cards.
forgot her originally, so that's actually pretty fitting.
And hey, who doesn't love it when their massive foibles are recorded for posterity?
But now here's the question now. With 2 scenarios left in this campaign, do you foresee, like, spending the experience for her, or for other cards that you've already had your eye on? Or I guess I don't know how you even consider... Am I just going right into the main discussion topic? Should I stop?
Possibly, yeah. I don't know.
I don't think I'd ever upgrade to...
No,
level
well, we
1.
knew that already.
I think it...
Yeah, I think I'd
3 or
skip
bust.
straight.
But... Yeah, I don't know.
That's yeah. Yeah, I don't know, because maybe in 4-player, and that's the only time I've ever seen Aquina even trigger, let alone be worth her cost.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
even then, probably not.
All right, last piece of news is kind of that little rules segment that I'm going to be starting doing. And this is kind of building off the last one I did where we talked about extra actions and how they're used. There was a big discussion, and actually we sent it off to Matt. I think it was BD Flory that sent it off to Matt. And it actually took like a few days to get a response, because the first response was, you know what, we're not sure. We're going to talk about it as a team. And then, like, it was over a weekend and then a couple days, and he's like, okay, we've settled on what we're doing. So it was quite the to-do. But as far as investigators that have extra actions, like Marie or Daisy, that are contingent on something, so Daisy can use... She has an extra action, but it can only be used for tome abilities. If something in the game causes you to lose an action, like, what's the one from... when you go drinking at the bar?
Something in the drinks.
Yeah. So you draw that, and it's like each investigator who's had a drink loses an action. So the discussion was, can you lose Daisy's tome ability or tome action instead of a real action? Because the old rule was anytime you can possibly use those bonus actions, they're the ones that are used first. So like Leo's additional action, that is the first action that you use. So the ruling came back saying that no, whenever the game tells you to lose an action, it is specifically speaking to your 3 basic actions each turn. However,
That makes sense.
if you lose all those and you are instructed to lose another action, it can take the special action.
So if you're doing
Daisy
absolutely terribly, and you get that, because when are you going to lose all 3 actions?
Okay. So to all you rules aficionados who balk at those of us who just default back to the Grim Rule, here you go. Grim Rule won this one.
Yeah. This part of it.
Is there a worse way to interpret that?
Nope, that is the worst way.
No.
Yep.
There is not.
Hey,
Grim Rule won.
I'm just going to say about the Grim Rule as a rule aficionado. The Grim Rule is for when you're playing in the middle of a game and you're not sure, right? And while we're waiting for rulings, I usually Grim Rule something. I was hoping for this one, like, I'm losing an action. Well, it is an action. I can only use it on tomes, but could I choose to lose that specific action? I was hoping for that, merely to give Daisy just slightly better stature. in some scenarios, like in these small little loopholes. But unfortunately did not go my way. So
Yeah.
yeah, so there you go. If you're going to lose an action, it has to be your real actions first. And then at the end of that, if you're instructed to lose more actions, they can take away your special actions.
So Arkham's Razor 1, anti-Arkham's Razor rules gurus 0 in my
Daisy,
extremely
0.
limited and narrow pool of scoring.
Yeah. Daisy lost out on this. I think she's one of the only ones that really lost. Oh, and Marie.
Poor Daisy.
That's it for rules.
All right. Ian, I will turn it over to your capable hands to lead us through.
It's my time. Okay.
It is your time.
I've been waiting for this moment. So our discussion today is, like we said at the top, kind of the philosophy of how you go about spending those sweet XP. What kind of cards do you spend on? What are the different kinds of upgrades? And I think this aspect of like leveling up your deck is definitely what sets it apart from deck building for any other LCG out there. Just this fact that you have to consider like spending XP at all and how and what kind of cards you're going to pick for that. So we thought we'd spend some time, there's been discussion on this cast and in other places about deck building in general. How do you build kind of a base level deck? But the idea here is to talk about, instead of just kind of blindly groping in the dark and thinking about, I'll just throw in this card here and this card there. Is there a way to be more thoughtful about those decisions and figure out some kind of philosophy or strategy behind how you want to do that? So it was funny that we were going for this topic because then FFG put out that article, which was kind of similar. And they did a classification system of like, there's 4 different types of players as far as how they approach XP. We're going to talk a little bit about our own classifications, which are different because, we came up with this beforehand. So I guess the first question is, before we even get into like the upgrading of what kind of cards we're going to choose to spend our XP on, about XP itself, and think about how hard in general do you commit to getting those XP, getting those victory points. And who wants to go before Sean talks about Delve 2D?
I think for me personally, when I start a scenario, I try to find all the XP where I can get it, and I go hard for it. But then as the scenario goes along, and as I see it kind of coming to a culmination, I look at it and be like, okay, priority number 1 is getting a good resolution, right? Priority 2 is VP. But it's like 1.5 is VP priority kind of thing. So I think it takes it changes over the course of a scenario, and I think you need to take a realistic view of where you are each time that agenda flips, and each time something comes out, maybe new enemies spawn, and be like, okay, well maybe that location is just lost and I'm never getting it and I just have to deal with it. So
I'm the kind of player where the first time through a scenario, I am so focused on the scenario, like the story of it, the narrative, and looking at like, oh, this is a narrative decision I have to make. I wonder how that's good. Like I'm so focused on the triggers and the actions and consequences that when a location flips over and it has victory 1, I'm like, it registers as almost like barely a thought, like, oh, victory on that one. But I don't prioritize it at all. Whereas second, third, fourth time through a scenario, like when I've gone through the campaign with another character or on my next time through or whatever, like then I'm like, okay, that's right, this is a victory location. How can I best clear this location and get that point? But the first time through, I'm very much focused on the scenario as a whole and less on the victory points.
Go ahead, Ian. I mean, apparently it's a foregone conclusion what I'm going to say. So.
For me, I think I'm the kind of the player that doesn't focus that much on getting the victory points, and I think that may be to my detriment, and I've kind of changed my mentality a bit thinking about this topic, and also I just feel like there's quite a few scenarios in this current campaign, there's not a lot of XP to go around. Like, there's some where you're averaging like 1 or 2 XP, which just isn't a lot if you're trying to substantially upgrade your deck. So now
there's a card for that.
We'll get to it. So now my latest campaign was a Windy solo campaign, Dark Windy with Dark Horse. And so when I got to the Miskatonic Museum, I know that's a scenario in the campaign that has some of the most victory points, if not the most. So I spent a lot of time just, even though I could have finished the scenario earlier, just going around and trying to do it. It is risky because I think part of the reason why I didn't go for it as ferociously before is because I was scared that the longer you take on a scenario, the more you give it a chance to just punch you and leave you for dead. So it's always a risk that you might get yourself into a situation. But I think if I feel confident in my setup, then nowadays I'll go for it and take that risk.
So, I don't think I'm so crazy that acquiring XP is above the overall goals of the scenario. But it's
I was just gonna say,
it.
can I guess that you treat it like acquiring all the XP is one of the ultimate goals of the scenario?
That's pretty much the best way to put it, even though, yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. If I see VP, it's now like it's on the the act to go get. I think one of the only VP that I consistently leave on the board for scenarios that I've played, multiple times is frickin' Miskatonic University in Midnight Masks. I don't know that I've ever cleared that location.
What about with the
it's so ridiculous
standalone scenarios like Baleful Reveler from Carnival? Have you gotten him consistently? Because he, to me, is like the big standout. Like, he hits, I'm like, just avoid him. I'm not even going to try. Yeah.
He's tough. I mean, you have to have really damagey investigators because he scales directly with investigators, right? He's not like a masked hunter. He's like straight 5 per investigator. Mm-hmm. He's closer to Ghoul Priest. Yeah. Honestly, despite it being kind of my favorite scenario at this point, I've only played Carnival 5 times, and I think 3 out of those 5 times we got Baleful Reveler. The other time we managed to complete it without getting him, and then the last time that was the time that you and I played Nick, and he just beat us up. But anyway, so the VP to me are a really important piece, and I truly do consider them to be like, that's the other main objective, is get the XP, because the other scenarios that are coming up in this campaign, they're going to kind of expect you to have some. So you kind of have to consider it as an objective. And, Delve Too Deep is just such a good solution. I'm going to throw it out there. It's, when you look at my scenarios between investigators who are playing with Delve Too Deep and those who aren't,
we've seen the spreadsheet,
difference is marked. It's... There is no spreadsheet. I'm super not that organized. But it super makes a difference. So yeah, I mean, and that is exactly why I am so up on Delve Too Deep, because I value XP.
So let me ask you
highly.
this, because Ian kind of touched on it, and I know for my sake it's very pertinent, where I'll finish the scenario, and me being the kind of player where I am, I'm like, God, I only have 1 experience to spend after that scenario. Like, next time through, I really got to change up my strategy. So on the other end of that spectrum, Sean, have you ever gotten to a point where you're spending too many actions, too much energy on getting that VP, and it's come back to bite you?
Oh, sure. Overextension's definitely a thing. I mean, you definitely got to be smart about it. This entire game is about board positioning. I mean, if like was outlined, if you've got a location that is just lost to you, you gotta just accept that it's lost to you and be able to call it when it is.
4-player porn
so yeah,
library.
definitely.
Yeah. With a locked door and an arcane
That one's
barrier.
pretty rough.
Yeah. Well, that location's gone forever.
It's just like, well, yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. XP's important, man.
I think a classic case for me is in that kind of windy Miskatonic Museum situation. I had the last chamber out where I could just clear it out and finish it out, but then there was also another location still with clues on it that I could get victory points at. So I actually put it off and went to get it, but the thing was I was only a couple of doom away from the thing ending, so it was kind of a judgment call. Luckily things went in my way. I was confident enough with Wendy with the fact that she can redraw tokens, but so it does depend on investigator and all that, but it's still risky. There's still a chance that I could have gotten knocked out or just failed the scenario because I was hunting for that XP. But I think it does depend on scenario. Like if it's a scenario where there's only like 1 or 2 XP, maybe I guess my philosophy would be it doesn't matter, especially if it's a harder scenario, just get through it. But then you kind of pick your moments to go all out if you know there's a scenario where the victory points are just sitting there, and if it's on the easier side.
What scenario is that?
The museum.
I think that's the clearest example.
That's the one that I get. Yeah. I mean, but
well, that fits for that theme for
but
sure.
Would you guys ever, if you know there's victory point enemies sitting in there, like other than the gathering, would you sit around and wait for them to come out just to get it?
Yes. And I have
In good board position?
Yeah, that's exactly it. The other one I can think of is, the house always wins. If you've got Morgan and you've been pretty speedy, it's not easy. This doesn't happen to me very often, but the abomination you get was conglomeration of spheres, and you're like, God damn it, I wanted Servant of the Lurker. Like, I've waited for that guy to show up before. And sitting on that Resign location, playing a couple Delve Too Deep is a great way to pass the time.
Yeah, because Delve Too Deep, you're getting the VP, and you're also drawing a card milling through the encounter deck to get
Well,
more
and
VPs.
I was thinking of Miskatonic University with the Yithians, because they both are Victory 1, but usually when they hit table, I'm like, oh, I don't want to face a Yithian! It's like, get it away from me, get it away from me! So, in that scenario, I don't think I would be stalling for Yithian victory points, although that one has a much clearer endpoint than House Always Wins does.
Yeah, the Ethians can get they can get nasty for some reason. Maybe it's because they're so big so early in the campaign. But for some reason, like, Servant of the Lurker, I'm generally actively looking for him, but when a Ethian
Well, it's
shows
the
up,
discarding
I'm
a card, and then it's the... Yeah, that's the biggest reason why I don't like him, is because they literally limit what I can do in the rest of the scenario. So it's like, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, I think I generally tend to, like I was saying earlier, play it a bit safer and just get out of dodge. But an elusive will make me a bit more brave, because then I can, if that resign location's already revealed, then I know I can kind of double back, do whatever, and or even I'm out of here is kind of, it's maybe an underrated way to farm XP, in the sense that that you can go out and take some risk and have an escape button if you
also
need it.
We were talking a number of episodes ago about saving Peter Clover when you do House Always Wins second. I'm out of here, elusive plus I'm out of here, great way to do it. That's a different conversation.
Yep. Yeah, it kind of gets to, I mean, I guess there's a sense in which you can actually build your deck. Obviously Delve Too Deep, but some of these other examples, you can actually build your deck around trying to maximize VP. So,
and I'd recommend it.
and probably rogues and mystics are best suited for that if you're considering those cards. Or, yeah. So, now that you have the XP in hand, the question is how you're actually going to spend it. And so the first thing is thinking about how we actually look at these cards and evaluate them as an upgrade. Thinking about how much is too much to spend on XP and how much you think about a card is worth in terms of XP. So I think the best way to kind of make this more concrete is thinking about, what do you guys think are some examples of cards that to you are just like the perfect XP cost, the ones that are kind of under or over costed in terms of XP?
I think Lucky, upgraded Lucky is, and if you look at Cash too, it's kind of perfect. It's like 2 XP is a card draw. Same exact effect, same everything. It just replaces itself. I find Lucky to be like a perfect upgrade, or balance-wise, personally.
I would agree with that. I would also say that Brother Xavier, considering he's a Guardian card, I would argue that you could put 2 XP on him, 3, maybe even 3, but 2 for sure, and I would still take him almost every time, just because. Oh yeah,
I'd
easily.
pay 2 for him.
The fact that he's only 1 is bonkers. Like, I cannot get over that. So he's pretty much always my first upgrade with a Guardian deck.
Yeah, along similar lines, I wonder, like, I would pay more XP for Pathfinder. Like, here, have a free action for 1 XP.
And the most
It's
important
like...
action.
Okay.
Yeah, yep.
In the... Yeah, I'm still not sure if I'd call it straight up overcosted, but one that I always kind of have to hem and haw about a little bit is Grotesque Statue. Like, I love that card, but 4 XP is always just like...
It's expensive.
I could get 2 Luckies!
Yeah, usually that's where you see that line is kind of like that 3 to 4 XP. Like, once you get to 4 XP, that's when you really start questioning if it's a card that you... Because chances are you're only going to be able to buy 1 copy of it. And that, to me, that makes a big difference. Like, if I can buy 2 copies of one thing or only 1 copy of another one, I tend to focus on the 2 copies of something, just because of the chances of you finding it in a game double. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's more reliable in your deck. It's a reliable upgrade. I think Sure Gamble's overcosted. 3 XP, the 2 costs, and then you can switch the negative to a positive. I feel like 3 is too much for that.
Yeah. That's an event, right?
It is.
Yeah, it's fast.
Oh, it'd have to be.
But, yeah.
Yeah, that one...
Well, in that, I've never found room in my XP budget for it. Yeah, I'd probably have to agree.
I find that's one I have upgraded to quite a bit, and then I never freaking draw the damn thing ever. Yeah, I mean, in theory, it's a powerful card. You're basically guaranteeing success for the most part, unless you draw one of those tokens we don't talk about. But yeah, I don't know. I think 3 is possibly fair, maybe 2. I don't. The one I have a hard time for in Rogue is actually Hot Streak. I like it a lot, but I think in general, just 4 XP for anything, that I think it is kind of guaranteeing that likely you're only going to get 1 copy, and so it's kind of a tough one because you're not going to see it a lot of games unless you have good card draw.
And 4 XP, I have a little anecdote or story about Hot Streak and Book of Shadows, another 4 XP card that arguably doesn't see a lot of play. Well, here we go. So we had a 3-player game, and it was me, my wife, and my brother-in-law, and my wife, she was playing Jenny, and she took 1 copy of Hot Streak. And I was playing Jim, and I took 1 copy of Book of Shadows. And we both had this game where she just sat on Hot Streak the whole time because she's like, I don't know why I took this. I don't need this. It's useless to me. And I got Book of Shadows into play like right away. And the whole time I'm like, this is awesome. I just keep making Shriveling last. And then like after that, like that was in a 3-player game. So then I tried Jim solo, and I immediately took Book of Shadows because I had such good experience with it in 3-player. And in solo, I was like, why? This is a dead card. Get rid of it. I don't have time for this. I cannot invest the actions to use this. So... But I would agree that Book of Shadows, like after seeing that, I would say 4 XP is too much for Book of Shadows. And also too much for Hot Streak.
The fact that Daisy can't take Book of Shadows, like, I still, come on.
Her deck building requirement should be like, any Seeker up to level 2 Mystic.
It should just be any tome. Any tome, yeah.
Or end tomes.
It should be any tomes.
She doesn't go to that section, though. Not the Shadow section.
Yeah.
Too many bad books in the Shadow section.
That's scary.
And she's running around with the Necronomicon. What the hell, Daisy?
See? Yeah.
So I guess thinking about these upgrades in terms of categories, I kind of came up with a scheme. I guess we'll just go over it quickly, and then we can talk about whether my categories are shit, and also which of these kind of categories you tend to emphasize, and also if there's any other ones that I didn't think of. So kind of the different, if you want to group the upgrades, I kind of thought of a few categories. The first is ones that improve efficiency of some kind, whether resources or cards or actions. So I think of something like Emergency Quiche, the upgraded version, or Lucky. And also Leo's an example to me because it's just cheaper, right? So it's improving the efficiency of your resources. And then I think there's a category of like bomb effects. Like these are kind of just the one time effects that just have a big impact on the game, like Will to Survive, where you don't have to draw chaos tokens. I even put Shotgun in that category because you only get a couple of uses, but they could be key. Then there are the permanents, which are just like it sounds, like Charisma, Keen Eye, Streetwise. There are the ones that are just upgraded versions of cards you already have, like Shriveling, Switchblade. And then finally, this is kind of a miscellaneous category, but those kind of effects that just don't exist at the base level, things like Cat Burglar or Close Call, just these kind of effects that you don't get access to unless you upgrade to them. So thinking about the cards you guys kind of upgrade to, which ones do you think you kind of emphasize?
I generally lean towards the efficiency bit. Particularly movement. Like if I can spend XP in the first or second scenario and get a couple cards that will increase my mobility, like that's usually the first thing I go to. And then once I have that done, I'm kind of a mix between your bursty effects and the stuff that you just can't get at level 0.
Yeah, I mean, Power Gamer Scott here, improving efficiency, I'm just like, yeah, more efficiency, right? Like, and that's kind of building on what you said, Nick, where like if I can buy one of one thing or 2 copies of one thing, I'm going to go for those 2 copies because it makes it more reliable. And then if I can make it more efficient with Lucky and Quiche and stuff like that,
right.
I mean, that's amazing. I don't go for bomb effects very often. I'm usually in Permanence as well. Like, Charisma's a really good one, and yeah, some upgraded versions, but the efficiency thing, I'm just all over that.
You know, when we picked this topic and I started reviewing Ian's show notes, I was thinking about this question, and I really wish I had an answer, but the answer is really just like, it depends on the day. I am capricious as hell. So some days I'll be all about like, yeah, upgrade caches, upgrade luckies. We're just gonna make this deck lean and mean, baby. And then some days I'm like, shotgun! So, I don't know. I think it depends a little bit on your investigator. It depends a little bit on where you're headed in the campaign. Like, if you've got a big ol' enemy you need to kill, and you know that, I suppose if you're able to metagame a little bit, then the big bomb effects probably have a little bit more value. It's very easy to me when my deck is tight and I have no idea what I'd cut. It's very easy to just upgrade cards that are already in your deck, even if maybe you consciously know that's not the good play. And I think ultimately when I build an encounter or a Gator deck, there are quite often very specific upgrade cards that I have in mind when I build the level 0 deck. And if that's the case, then that makes the choice right away. But absent that kind of pre-planning, yeah, I don't know what I generally do.
That's a good point too, Sean. Like if you're doing like higher education spellcaster Daisy, or if you are going for like, you know, Wendy and Friends Charisma, like there's sometimes you pre-build a deck being like, okay, I just got to get through the first scenario, get X amount of XP, and then I'm good to go.
Yeah, we'll say since the Permanence started to drop, my instances of pre-planning XP expenditure has increased.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, even though I think these kind of classifications are useful to think about the different categories, I find in actual practice that I do my planning more around the XP cost. Like, my plan is there's usually like a 1 XP or 2 XP for each investigator card that is kind of my first buy. So that's like your Pathfinders, or maybe your upgraded big man on campus, something like that. So in that case, the category doesn't matter as much as like, this is my first buy. But beyond that, I do think is kind of my second or third buys. I do tend to put a big emphasis on permanence these days, just because I have had that experience a lot of, you buy these upgraded cards and then how often do you end up drawing them? Obviously the odds go up if you get 2 copies, but permanents, they're just there and you can make use of them. So, I'm buying a lot of higher education and streetwise, and charisma is just always good. So I guess that's probably the category I emphasize most.
Okay, so related then, I suppose probably to only one of these categories. How do you guys determine then when you pick a card that necessitates you taking out another card from your deck? How do you go about figuring out what comes out? Like, it's easy when you're just upgrading a card that's already there.
Yeah. I think I check to see if there's knife in my deck.
At this point, it probably shouldn't be.
I'm just Go ahead, Nick. You probably had a better point.
For me, it's mostly about redundancy. I look at how many cards... Like, okay, I'm going to talk about Roland because he's the one that I play by far the most. So I build him primarily taking out enemies, secondarily movement and clues. So it's like, I look at how many cards like if I'm getting shotgun, for instance, I look at how many other cards I have that deal a large amount of damage to a single target, or a large amount of damage to whatever. So usually when I'm putting shotgun in, one of the first cards I end up taking out is, if it's in there, is maybe like dynamite, because I play solo a lot, so I don't run into multiple enemies too often, and they both kind of do similar, quote-unquote, similar things, where the shotgun is a lot of damage to a single target, dynamite is moderate damage across a number of targets. So I look at redundancy, I look at what can this card do better than cards that are already in my deck, and barring that, I mean, that's pretty much the first thing I do, is look at how I can just make the deck more efficient at what it's already doing.
Yeah, I think the classic example of that for me is when I upgrade to Pathfinder, then I'll generally take out the copies of Shortcut, which is, I probably don't need that extra movement if I have Pathfinder. But moving beyond redundancy, like, there are times when it gets to the point of, like, it's hard to cut anything. And then at that point, usually I'm looking at events that are kind of good, nice to have, but I'm not necessarily playing them every game. They're more like toolboxy stuff, and then I might cut from like 2 to 1, and then that's how I make room for stuff, if there's just no like duplicate effects at that point.
I think I'm with you, Nick. I kind of look at, okay, I have 6 killing cards, I have 4 investigate cards, and if I have something that makes investigating better, I switch it for an investigating card. I think a key thing here too is to, even when you're picking within those categories, remember your cost curve. So your example of dynamite to shotgun, perfect, right? Like it's right around the same thing. But Ian, for your example, like shortcut to Pathfinder, that's something you need to consider also. Like, okay, how am I going to balance out the rest of my deck? Because going from 0 to 3, that's a decent change in your curve. Not that it's wrong, because I think Pathfinder's amazing, but it's just something to keep in mind too.
Yeah, definitely. And something that I'm keeping more in mind as I go along that I maybe didn't keep as close an eye on before is the balance of skill icons in my deck. I feel like before I kind of roughly approximated and just kind of threw stuff around, but now I'm keeping a closer eye as I find that those kind of small details actually make a big difference as you get down towards the end of the game, and they're like, where are all the damn combat icons in my deck? Oh, I took out that card when I upgraded. Oops. So, yeah. It's something to consider.
So one thing I found myself doing, and you guys can let me know if you think this is a terrible idea for anyone other than Agnes, so let me argue why I found myself doing it with Agnes, is that as the deck fills out, and part of the problem, and we'll call it a problem even though it's not really a problem, is that Delve Too Deep works so efficiently that I have actually not straight up run out of things to spend XP on, but I'm kind of getting close.
Hashtag humble brag.
Well, I can understand. Like, you hit a point where it's like you look at what's available, and you're like, why would I add that to this deck? Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's more where I'm at. So what has ended up starting to come out when I spend XP at all? This is really only the past scenario where this actually became an issue. But what has started to come out are some of the neutral skills, because Agnes specifically replaces so many of those skills with willpower, and she's got access with the story objectives and Peter Sylvester to so many nice static stat boosts.
Oh yeah,
like I started to just
I agree.
Take those
No,
out. I think I've only got
I do the
two
same
left in
thing.
the deck,
As I'm adding
which is
cards that make specific tests easier, I tend to remove the skill cards that exist only to make those tests easier. So as I add weapons or something to a Guardian deck, I might take out those overpowers, or maybe even an unexpected courage, although that I'm much less likely to remove. But yeah, I can totally agree with you on that regard.
I think that's especially the case if you start getting those permanents like Streetwise and higher education. Like, obviously those are helping boost you, so, and you have knowledge that you're going to get them right away. As long as you have the resources to sink into them, then you can probably make some room and cut some of those neutral skills.
And to build on your point, Ian, too, if you're upgrading and really minding the number of skill icons you have in the deck, if you're upgrading into a card that has a double icon, maybe you can cut that neutral skill that matches those double icons.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, don't use this as the only determining factor.
As I continued to do it. That's fair. But as I looked at the deck, like last time I disassembled it, and we'll talk about assembling and disassembling decks at the end of this segment, but as I disassembled it last time, I'm like, I've only got 2 neutral cards left.
And they're knife and
what
knife.
am I doing?
Oh, knife.
I think there's also, it does depend on investigator. A little bit later we're going to talk specifically about each investigator, but someone like Wendy, that definitely happens to me as well, because she is, as you upgraded, she's getting better at being able to just like pass tests without too much trouble. And those particular cards she has access to, there's not like a ton where I'm like, oh, I need to upgrade that right away. Whereas in Rogue, I feel like I'm always chasing XP because there's a lot of high XP cards that I want for that particular class. One thing to consider is we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but how does your decision making change as the campaign goes on? So what are you picking early? What are you picking mid? And now, as we're getting late in the Dunwich, which cards are you looking at?
For me,
I think early.
I was just going to say, for me, I'm just going to echo back to what card, like the categories that we talked about, where early on I'm looking at efficiency, and I'm looking at doing what this deck does, but better and faster. And then that middle campaign, it's like, okay, what ancillary cards, or what cards that are like kind of a sideways compatibility, like they do something that's sort of in line with what this deck does, but that could be useful. I'll throw that in there. Usually around the middle. And then by late game, it's usually trying to shore up the weaknesses that have come across throughout the campaign, where it's like, all right, I've taken 2 mental trauma and 1 physical trauma. I need to have a ready, available answer to that sort of thing. At least that's what I'm experiencing so far with where we're at in Dunwich.
Yeah, I think where I'm at is it depends on the investigator. But for the most part, if that investigator has a weakness, it's that's the first thing I'm looking to shore up with my upgrades. Is for instance, with Daisy, fighting is an issue, so I get her that higher ed so that the spells I included can actually do something a little bit more effectively. Something along those lines. Mid to late, I don't even know if I've got a differentiation between mid to late yet. I think possibly late. The only the only thing that's going to be different is I'll take the Delta Deeps out of my deck. But yeah, then it's just kind of filling out, maybe anticipating something I'll need for future scenarios, things along those lines.
I think the early campaign, similar to what you guys are saying for me, is just getting those key cards that tend to be lower in XP value, and those things that are going to make a big difference in the deck, and get 2 of them early on. So I'll kind of prioritize the 2 copies versus like getting 1 copies of stuff. The mid campaign, I mean, again, it varies by investigator, but I feel like my strategy at this point of the campaign, if this still counts as mid a lot, is a battle with the Chaos Bag. Like, any cards that let me avoid taking tests or let me have a better chance at succeeding a test, or, you know, these are things like Sure Gamble, Will to Survive, like those kind of cards that just take the Chaos Bag out of the equation for the most part. Like, those are cards I'm really looking to, because as the campaign goes on, your Chaos Bag is getting a little unfriendlier. So that, like, those are kind of the things that are coming back to bite me when I don't pay attention to that, because there's just no way around the Chaos Bag.
Wasn't sure if he came through or not, and then I saw the little green ring show up on my portrait. It's like, oh boy. Yeah, no, and I said it before, like, anytime I play, well, again, Roland, like, again, the most played investigator for me, like Brother Xavier and Pathfinder, first 2 things. Get that movement done and get that combat and covering his sanity. So
I'm just curious about the, like, we've already seen and talked about in the podcast a couple of the big bomb high XP cards at the end of the cycle that have already been spoiled officially, and I'm just wondering at this point whether I'm even going to be able to afford them by that point. Like, it seems like before, when I first saw them, I was thinking, oh, like, that makes sense. By that point in the campaign, you're going to be, like, diving Scrooge McDuck's style into XP, like, it'll be no thing. But now I'm looking at how things actually shake out, and I'm like, actually, to afford those cards, you probably have to have a long-term strategy of, like, I'm going to save XP and take times where I just don't upgrade at all in order with those in mind later on.
And play Delve Too Deep.
Right. But yeah, that Golden Pocket Watch, like, that one is, like, that's an XP sink. Like, that, oof, that one looks, I think it was 8. I think it was 4.
Was that 8 or 10?
Yep.
8, yeah.
So,
yeah.
And is the lightning gun exceptional?
I mean, it is exceptional, but
No,
it's
that was
not.
just
It doesn't
a
have a
5.
keyword exceptional. So yeah.
Right.
It's just
It's-
expensive as sin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing we haven't talked about, but how much do you guys find yourself saving? Like, oh, I'm not going to upgrade at all. I'm saving for something bigger.
Not.
Like 2 to 3.
I'd say
tops,
1 to 2
and that's
tops.
only if I end up not having many. Yeah. But that's the thing, is there's not
Right.
many big cards to spend now. You ask us that same
You know,
question in a
every
year,
time
our
we
answer's
get
gonna
a
be different.
Mythos pack, I'm there's a little part of me that's disappointed that this late in the campaign we're still getting level 0 cards. It's like, just give us 2 different XP cards for each class. Like, come on. But yeah, no, I think that especially once we start into the next cycle and we have all the tools from Dunwich plus the tools that we're starting to get from Carcosa, like, that'll be where we'll really see the options kind of explode.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think the XP burns a hole in my pocket more often than not. And I'm like, I'd rather have the help in the next scenario versus...
That's exactly what it is. It's like, okay, well, if I spend the 2 now, then that's 2 experience for a card that I will have in my deck for this scenario and the next one. I think the only time I've legit held out is when I built that really janky-ass gym scavenging build. Because that thing hinged around having 2 grotesque statues. So I'm pretty sure I should probably go just grab my campaign log, but if I'm remembering correctly, I got 4 in the first scenario, so I got my first one. I only got 3 experience in the second scenario, so I carried all 3 of it over to the next one just to make sure that I could
That's
grab
rough,
that grotesque statue. It did, and that deck is not good.
That's the moral of the story.
It really is. It's way too much work for way too little payoff. Guys, Grotesque Statue has 4 charges. You don't need to work really hard to recur that. It turns out.
Yeah, I think if it's like 1 or 2 XP I have hanging around, like a lot of times there's odd XP and you save that. But if I have like 3 or 4, that's definitely getting spent on something. Yeah, for sure. So I think at this point we can kind of jump into, we've been talking in kind of like the abstract terms about all this stuff, but more concretely thinking about for each investigator, thinking about what are the key upgrades for that particular investigator, what are their must-haves, like what kind of path do you take. We'll kind of see how it goes in terms of time, whether we'll get through them all, but I guess we can start, because Nick has been talking about him a lot, with Roland.
You say that like it's surprising.
Based on your... How did he end up first on that list?
I forgot if I typed the list or not. I was like, oh wow, he put Roland first, but no, that was me.
Yeah, I didn't type the list. So thinking about Roland, what's kind of your upgrade strategy?
Well, I've already
for
said
Roland?
First and foremost is you got to shore up that weakness, because that sanity of 5 is going to be hanging over your head every single scenario, and it will, by the time you get 3-4 scenarios in the campaign, that's going to feel really bad if you don't have something to counteract it. Brother Xavier is the perfect way to cover that. He's an ally, which kind of sucks for Guardian, simply because Guardian has a lot of good allies, but at the same time, he's an ally / tank, so he helps with the enemy mitigation, he boosts your willpower, and that's 2 sanity that you don't have to worry about. So Brother Xavier is usually one of the first ones that I go for. And then in Roland specifically, I talk about movement. Movement is a huge part of the game, and that's usually the thing that you're going to want when you want, or realize that you need it when you don't have it. So Pathfinder, now that we have that card, Pathfinder and Brother Xavier, that's my first 4 XP pretty much every time.
Do you find that as a barrier to... Because I find Roland runs pretty high on his cost curve with the weapons and kind of the things he normally needs. Do you ever find... Like, I want Guardians to get more...
Oh, no, for sure. And that's why, like, if I don't get Brother Xavier in turn 1 or turn 2 or one of those early turns when I haven't spent all my resources, it's a little harder for him to hit table. But when it's turn 1 and I have Xavier in hand, he hits table immediately, because I don't care if that's all my resources. Like, I need him out, and having him in play, that's one less thing I have to worry about. Pathfinder hasn't been too detrimental to playing that, whether it's mid-game or not. I've been pretty lucky with getting it out fairly early most of my games. But yeah, any sort of resource acceleration, you're right, Guardian is lacking in that, sadly.
I haven't played Roland as much since the core campaign, but I think I do agree with you. That's one big change. Like in the core campaign, I think because it was a shorter, just 3 scenarios, that I tended, and since Brother Xavier didn't exist at the time, also important to mention, I tended to upgrade to B-Cop level 2 first, is kind of like my first buy, because it is a really good card. But I think with this longer scenario and the horror pressure in this particular campaign is pretty intense, that I think Brother Xavier is your best bet. Like, that's Roland's biggest weakness, and anything you can do to give him a shield helps. I do think Keen Eye is a good buy. Like, it boosts those 2 stats he's going to use a lot, combat and the intellect. And I think Charisma is an interesting buy for him too, just because the Guardian allies tend to be really good. So it'd be nice. The problem there is you would run into the resource costs, because they also tend to be more costly. So getting 2 of those out is kind of a tricky situation.
Yeah, and if we're talking about Night of the Zealot specifically, I used to say that going into Scenario 2 of Night of the Zealot with Roland, take Police Badge. Definitely take Police Badge, because having those 2 extra action, having that option to ditch that for 2 extra actions when you have to get around that big map is invaluable. However, now that Pathfinder exists for less experience and a relatively permanent effect, there's no reason to take Police Badge over Pathfinder specifically for large map maneuvering. So.
Yeah, I think the good thing about Roland is there's not like a ton of, beyond a couple of initial ones, there's not like a ton of must-haves, so I think that makes his XP path a little easier. I'm guessing from the other silence that they don't mess with Roland that much.
I'm so bad at Roland. Like, I wish I could offer anything useful, but every time I play with him, I'm just bad. And I know other people have had success, so I assume it's just me. But no, I definitely think that he needs something to soak horror, because that's always where I seem to be falling up short with him, is just how quickly that can pile up. So Xavier's great in that regard. He's a 3 horror sync. He's got the willpower boost. I think in this later build that I did, I went pre-built for charisma, and I also put in Milan for a little bit of
resources.
Horror soak. Yeah, resources horror soak to try to help with the spendy cards that I assumed I was going to be buying.
Yep.
But it turns out Milan's a spendy card too. So. I don't know about Scott though. I can't speak for him.
I think you
take
play
Zoe. I'm gonna play Guardian.
Yeah, that's true.
I think Sean, you take Ransom Man's approach in the chat, which is just upgrade to Agnes from Roland.
I missed that. Yeah, although I will, to be fair, Agnes covers Roland's weaknesses pretty well. I need to try them again in a campaign, because right now the Roland campaign I'm running is Roland and Wendy, because they did pretty well for me in Night of the Zealot, but oh my god, that campaign for Denwich Legacy is just terribad. Though, to be fair, I don't know how to play Roland, and I'm trying out my janky ass Dodge Tank Aquina build for Wendy, so it may not be the investigator's fault in that case.
Roland is not
Pilot
responsible. So speaking of Zoe, everyone's favorite chef, how is her path different from Roland?
I feel like for her, Keen Eye is like amazing, because she's already got a decent willpower, and it allows you to boost the investigative power of her, which is kind of lacking a bit, and you have that ability to pump the fight ability just that much to get that +2 at the normal difficulty or whatever. Like, yeah, I mean, Keen Eye is a bit expensive for pumping, but I think that's a key one.
I actually like Charisma more than Roland and Zoe, and at first it wasn't one that I was thinking about for her, and I ended up taking it. And because she does have kind of her resource generation, it is a bit more feasible to get these kind of high-cost allies out. And you tend to accumulate a lot of these story allies too, that are good, but you want to have them out at the same time as Xavier or whoever else. And so I think Charisma is a good buy.
Yeah, I would agree. My wife and I are running a 2-player campaign through Dunwich, and she's doing a double Charisma Zoe build, and it has been pretty useful so far, having both of those.
And I think we can't forget her alternate signature event, Taunt. Upgrading that. I mean, if she's got her cross out, getting a bunch of money and a bunch of cards, and she's just going to kill a bunch of people anyways. But, like, it's just, if you're running.
I mean, even without her cards out, upgraded Taunt is just a free action to kill enemies.
So, do you guys
really what it
include
amounts
Taunt
to.
Or upgraded Taunt in a? Well, this might be a moot question because I don't know if you guys play True Solo or not. I know Ian has played it a few times, but do you do Taunt in a True Solo game? Because I always skip it in True Solo.
Yeah, no, not in True Solo.
Yeah, in True Solo, I'd probably skip it.
I mean,
I'll be the contrarian here and say, yeah, do it. More free actions.
I mean, it makes whippoorwills like way easier to deal with. because you get to, if it's upgraded,
Yeah.
you get to draw a card.
But they
and you
exist
don't spend
in
an action engaging
2
them.
or what?
But
Maybe 3 of the scenario, 2 of the scenarios so
Yeah.
far. So
Yeah, so I mean, side case, but yeah, I wouldn't play it solo.
I think Zoe's another case too of it, especially because even more restricted than Roland as far as what she can access leveling up. There's like those few key cards, and then after that, it's like, there's some stuff I could spend on, but I'm not super pressured to level up Zoe a ton. She kind of is just what she is, and you have that base set up, add those key pieces, and she's good to go, I think.
Yes.
So the next one on our list might...
Oh, and as an aside, just bringing it back to earlier, it's not an upgrade card, though it's related to upgrades. Play Delve Too Deep in Zoe.
yeah,
She's one of the
I can
best
see that.
investigators in the game to handle it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because if you pull an enemy, that's basically a free event, because you get the resource back, and now you have an enemy that Zoe wanted anyway.
I got a note too as another aside. Even just talking about this, between Roland and Zoe being one of the Dunwich Gators and Roland being the core, because Roland can choose from 2 classes to upgrade and Zoe can only upgrade Guardian. It's interesting how they're much more narrow of a path you can take them through the upgrade world, if you will. But there's just way more discussion on Roland than there was of Zoe. Like, Roland was 10 minutes-ish. Zoe's like, oh yeah, these 3 cards. Okay, you know what I mean? Like, it's just casual observation. I'm just interested to see if that if that follows through.
Yeah. I mean, it probably will, just the nature of it being a lot more restricted.
Mm-hmm.
Though we should probably be careful about how much time we spend.
Well, that's funny you say that because I wanted to go back to
Yeah.
Roland. No, I'm just kidding.
Nick knew what he was doing
Actually,
by putting him at the top.
I was
of the
going in
list.
order. Like, if you look at all the card number, like, it's not number order, but if you look at how FFG numbers their cards, it's always Guardian, Seeker, Rogue, Mystic, Survivor. So, yeah, I know,
What, there are
right?
card numbers?
And I mean, the next Gator is Daisy, and I think you can just take Ransom Man's suggestion and just upgrade to anyone else.
No.
So
Yeah, me too.
No, disagree.
I'm just
disagree. Daisy's become so fun.
Yes.
She's still tough to
Higher
play,
education.
but she's become
Yep.
so fun.
higher
education,
Yeah.
higher education, higher education. And that is all.
Yeah, I think she has... There's kind of a few key early buys, I think. Higher education for sure. I still like Encyclopedia as kind of a first buy,
Yes.
especially in multiplayer. It's so good.
In multiplayer, I'll give that to her.
Yeah, in
for sure.
multiplayer. Solo, maybe not as much. And then also just
Yes.
Pathfinder, since it's a good card. You can't really go wrong.
Yep.
I also really like upgrading just to maybe 1 disc of
Itzamna, yeah.
Itzamna.
Bless you.
Like just as kind of like a backup, like, oh man, something big came off the deck and I'm out of shriveling charges or I don't have money for higher education. It's just like a get out of jail free card real quick. But
Yeah, I agree, and it's a spot in Daisy that's not really like there's not a whole lot that's vying for that accessory slot. Like maybe if you want to run a rosary, but
Well, and
that's
why
where
would you run a
higher
rosary
education
with the
comes in
highest
best.
sanity of any investigator we have so far? For the plus
For the-
one will?
for the willpower
I think
boost.
there's other ways to do it.
but
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Well, again, higher education.
One of the ones I consider, maybe not immediately, but as we move through a campaign for her, is Deduction. Especially after playing Rex, it's like, I really want to gather more clues than I can right now. So the upgraded Deduction, I'll definitely take. Maybe not as a first buy, but a few scenarios in. And then Rex is kind of a similar deal, but slightly different. Like, I'm obviously probably not looking at Encyclopedia for him.
Yes.
Pathfinder for
Pathfinder
sure.
is
yes.
probably first or close to first.
Because the sooner you can get him camped on a location to go hungry, hungry hippos, the better off you are.
Dude. It went dead silent
Dude, I
and
was-
nobody
yes.
else was speaking, so I was like, are we good?
Okay.
Yeah, well, it was cut out for a second, but yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're back. All right, it's good. Yeah. So I'm trying to think what else. I too go a singleton disc for Rex. Maybe 2 if I'm doing the whole shenanigans where I'm scavenging with Rex, because scavenging the discs is just a great way to never have to deal with enemies.
I like magnifying glass, actually.
Agree.
I mean, not just the one cost reduction, but really that ability, if there's no clues on your location, returns to your hand to put something else out. Yeah.
I don't feel as much pressure to do the deduction in Rex because he's a beast anyway. But if I do have some XP to spare a few scenarios in, I'll do it just because it's pretty
fun to
dirty
clean a
gather that many
location in
clues
one
at
action.
once. Yeah.
Yes, but
Look what
I
can
think
do.
3+ players is a good spot to start taking deduction.
So now, if any of you were sick of hearing us talk about Pathfinder, no need to worry. We're done. Everybody who can take it, we've talked about. So
Yeah, that's true.
Pathfinder.
It'll be interesting a few cycles in when we have more potential staple upgrades to consider. I think maybe we'll revisit this 2 or 3 years in the future.
right?
I don't see
Unless
how that
we get
card ever goes
5
out of
scenarios in a
fashion.
row where
That's
there's only
fair.
3 locations. But even then, you still have to move between them. Oh, couple of 1 location scenarios.
Just bounce back and forth.
Yeah, the staycation cycle.
So let's move to the rogues. That's Skids and Jenny.
Yeah.
You guys are gonna
I
defer
think
to
that's
me.
you, buddy.
I will talk about Jenny first. Actually, no. Let's continue with talking about the core ones first, because then it narrows from there. So for Skids,
Here's one where you
From
just upgrade
Skids?
Agnes. I don't know how you guys play with 2
Careful.
willpower. How do you even play this game?
okay, so let's talk about that.
Poorly. No.
So if Roland's low sanity is his Achilles heel, the willpower is definitely Skids's. So that's why one of the key first buys you should consider is police badge, even just to get the +1 willpower. The difference between 2 and 3 doesn't seem like a lot. But in practice, it's a lot. That's going to help you minimize the horror from rotting remains and get rid of those stupid frozen from fears. And it plays into his whole thing of getting extra actions. So definitely police badge is one I would consider. And then from there, it kind of depends, I think, a lot on whether you're doing solo or multiplayer. Because in multiplayer, I tend to run Skids very Guardian heavy. He's a fighter. And so a lot of times I'll upgrade Beat Cops early to get that, just turn them into damage dealers and to help kind of cut down on actions I'm using. So he ends up being very Guardian heavy in terms of the core cards and then what he upgrades. In terms of the rogue cards, again, it kind of depends, but I look to something like Cat Burglar if I'm not going the kind of Guardian ally route, and I do eventually, not right away, but look to get those sure gambles, kind of a few scenarios in order to win that battle against the Chaos Bag.
Yeah. I think the only investigator that I'm worse at building and playing than Roland
I've
is.
played.
Agreed.
Are you agreeing that Sean is terrible?
It's tough.
I'm sure he's. I would accept it. I am super bad at playing those 2 specifically. I've had decent success with every other investigator, but it seems like every time I try to build for those guys, it's just grimness and depression follows.
Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, as much as I harp on Daisy for being, last place at the Olympics, all that stuff, I think Skids is my least favorite investigator to both build for and play. Maybe I just don't get it. You know what I mean? And Ian, I'm almost I want you to give me a deck list and be like, here, play through Dunwich or Night of the Zealot, and here's your upgrading path. So maybe I can see what I'm missing, but man,
Do it right, noob.
yeah, I know. Get better, right?
Like, even as a rogue aficionado, I agree with you guys that Skids is tough to build for and pilot, and more than anything, that 2-will gets you in a lot of trouble sometimes, and goes against like what he's good at when it's like sapping your actions. I find I've had a lot easier time building and playing him in multiplayer because, like I said, you run him more guardian heavy, and then what he becomes is a guardian that can kind of move around fast through things like elusive other cards. He's a guardian that can evade, much better than the actual guardians, and he has kind of those key things going for him that can get him a lot of binds. Solo, it's a tougher road because of that willpower. No one's gonna help you get out of it, and you have to cover things like investigating, which I think I guess my hypothesis would be what part of what makes Skid so tough, especially in solo, is that combination of rogue and guardian. It doesn't give him a lot of tools for investigating in particular.
Ian, if you're willing and you have a decent Skids solo build, I'm willing to throw it in my ass.
Oh boy.
My Arkham Solo series.
How could I?
Oh wait, hang on. That's the FCC knocking on my door. Yep.
Yeah.
We've overdone it.
How could I resist that offer?
Put Skids in his ass.
The episode in which we aim to get the explicit tag. So let's move on to Jenny, unless we have last things about Skids.
No, I was just gonna say, like, it's amazing to me how different Jenny and Skids are, to me at least, for upgrade decisions, for
Agreed.
initial building. Like, with
Yes, no.
Jenny is just
I would agree.
easy. Like, I just find it so incredibly easy to like throw together a Jenny deck. I'm like, yeah, this all works, and I have all the money in the world. Okay, well, here we go.
Turns out having a lot of money smooths over a lot of problems.
Yeah. And I mean, having Streetwise, like,
Yeah.
what an amazing upgrade.
Well, I think one of the key differences between Jenny and Skids is that Jenny is giving you resources, generating, and Skids' ability takes it away. So in some cases, like, you consider something like Streetwise, that can work for Skids for sure. But at the same time, it's also going to take away resources, which you need to balance. Like, how much do you need to spend your resources on extra actions and the rest of his cards? So yeah, Streetwise is definitely like an early buy for Jenny.
I think I haven't used it yet, but I feel like Switchblade,
Sure.
the upgraded one,
Yes.
is actually a pretty decent option in Jenny because you can only have those 5 out of class slots.
Yes.
Using them all for weapons is probably not a great idea, and you do need weapons. Apparently, there's enemies, so Switchblade is an awesome option to keep in class.
Yeah, definitely, because she doesn't have access to those Guardian cards for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The other,
Well, and with her ability to pump resources into some of those skill talents too, which I think is probably the most common build for her.
Yeah.
Like, Switchblade just becomes even better because you can just kind of massage that number right to where you need it to be for the chaos bag, and Bob's your uncle.
definitely one of the key buys for Jenny too, I think, is charisma, because she can afford to dump some allies out there, and there are great both rogue allies, and also because she has access to kind of the off-class allies. Like, charisma Jenny's kind of a common and a good way to go.
Yeah, double charisma, Jenny.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely a thing.
I didn't mention for Skids, but I actually do consider Hot Streak for him, just because like I said, his resource needs are high, so that's actually one where I might consider saving up for early on. All right.
I also feel like Leo is a great upgrade. I think it's just a good card in Jenny, but because she can play Leo and quickly recoup from such a huge investment, I feel like Leo's a pretty decent upgrade for her.
Mm-hmm.
That, and I think, I think we touched on this in a prior episode, but part of Jenny's thing is she's not got a whole lot of good options for action compression.
Mm-hmm.
Her thing is just every action I take, I'm probably going to succeed. So giving her another action is super powerful.
Okay, so leaving behind the rogues, we're now gonna go a little purple, and let's talk about Agnes and Jim. I'm gonna vote we don't talk about Marie because my guess is like that's probably a discussion saved for later when she actually exists.
Well, and who has built? I haven't even built a deck for her.
That's
true.
So I have.
Very minimal
Agreed.
experience, so yeah. So let's talk about Agnes and Jim.
Agnes is tough. I'm always not quite sure what to upgrade. It depends on the build. I tend to hint toward Luckies.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think what else.
I'm surprised Big
first.
Man on Campus isn't like Peter Sylvester your first upgrade.
Yeah, see, and that largely depends on the build.
Yeah.
Most builds I have now, Pete is Agnes's bow, so for sure, level 2 Pete is he goes in straight away.
So what sort of build would you not prioritize Pete? Because to me, he seems like the most obvious.
He really is right now. I think down the line, if we get any other allies that really contend for that slot. I think the one time recently that I haven't is I went just like hard purple Agnes and tried to maximize spells, and in that case I really wanted room for that Arcane Initiate, so Pete didn't go in until later on when after I could afford the charisma to make sure that I had the space for him.
The one time I built a deck for Agnes, I had both Pete and Arcane Initiate, and I don't think I saw either of them in play, so...
But yeah, so some of the stuff Agnes can afford, it's funny that she just like super doesn't need it. Like the upgraded Shriveling,
Which
upgraded Rite of Seeking, like I'm sure she could use it, but outside of multiplayer where you're for sure going to have 3 clues on every location, So I tend to be a little bit more into her survivor cards. So Flare generally goes in.
Mm-hmm.
Because aside from just being an amazing card, getting Pete out early is awesome. And, using the other action to fight, putting Agnes at a 5 with 3 damage, that's not terrible. And if you've got anything to chuck for that test, that's a pretty decent fight test. Those are kind of my big firsts.
Sean, I'm interested in talking about Shriveling because I agree. In Agnes, there's so many things boosting her willpower that you usually don't need that boost. But I find in Jim, in my current campaign, like my blind campaign into Dunwich, my 2 upgraded Shrivelings are just doing work. Like, it made him so much more reliable. And it's surprising how going from 4 willpower to 5, as far as Agnes versus Jim, how the +2 is less valuable.
Yep, for sure. And the other thing is Jim just doesn't have access to as many static willpower boosts either. He's got the Rosary. Yep. He doesn't have access to level 2.
He's got the Rosary.
God, I can't remember. That's pretty much it. I definitely would agree. I think Jim, it's far more far more valuable, and I think eventually, we're going to skip her for now, Marie, that's going to be far more valuable.
Mm-hmm. The card I'm curious about, because I haven't played Mystic a ton compared to some of the other classes, is Bind Monster. It seems like one that's always interesting to me, but how often have you guys ever taken it?
It's so expensive.
Resource. I want that card to be good because it's really fun.
Yeah.
I think the only time I've actually spent XP on it is in that really spell heavy Agnes deck. And the problem is with Agnes is just kill the thing. Like, why would I not just kill it? Like, it's cute. I can pin it down.
Right. She can kill it. Yeah.
Not very often.
It seems like a gym card potentially.
It's funny how we look at a lot of the purple cards and go, "This is a gym card," and then you look at a lot of the red cards and you're like, "This is awesome with Agnes."
I guess the thing with Jim though is his willpower is 4, and you have to test 3, or else the binding goes away, right? And I don't know. And Jim, I mean, I don't mind putting a machete in his hands.
Right.
Just kill the thing. I would love Bind Monster to work, but yeah.
I think I need to take it back. I did also put it in my Daisy build. I put a singleton copy in my Daisy build, and I think. No, I'm trying to remember if it had a cool moment. I think it was about to have a cool moment, and then I remembered I couldn't play it on an elite enemy, and I just was angry. Yeah, that sounds more accurate. 'Cause the problem is, like, the enemies that you'd like to just pin down and not to have to deal with are the ones you can't.
Wouldn't be very much like Arkham if you could just immobilize and get rid of the super big enemies with one card like that.
Stay there,
Yeah,
Cthulhu.
but they shouldn't tease us.
Yeah, I think I'm with you with it, guys. It's just, I think the issue with it is I could potentially see individual scenarios where it could be pretty useful. One thing we didn't talk about in general is, like, how much do you guys kind of make these decisions? Like, think about, I'm going to need this for a particular scenario.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, and I think that also, like, if you're going in with full knowledge, like you've played the scenarios a few times, I think when you're going in blind, like we talked about those different categories, I go for the more reliable efficiency, like just make my deck do what it does. But when you're going in with full knowledge, I'm just like, okay, get some efficiency, and then bomb. And even though those bombs might not be bombs in the real sense, they're bombs to that scenario, right? Like, Mind Wipe is good in, I can't remember which scenario, but Mind Wipe is amazing.
Undimensioned and unseen.
Yeah,
like
you and you.
Oh my goodness! But
You ampersand you.
yeah,
Though it does, it does reduce your VP potential. Just throwing
it
that
does.
out there.
But it also
That's
makes
true.
it like a cakewalk, right? Like,
Yeah.
so.
It's a nice panic button to have. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I feel like more than any other class, potentially Mystic is the one where I'm most interested in the 4 XP thing, which is the grotesque statue. Because it's so
Yeah.
good.
Oh, I thought you were going to
Yeah.
say Book of Shadows. I had one good game with it, and I was super excited, and then it didn't do anything after that, and it was just dead.
Brother.
Xavier?
No, I think that's the common experience with Book of Shadows. If you have any experience at all, it's good once.
Yeah.
No, I take that back. I've never had a good experience with it.
It is called the Book of Shadows because it never sees the light of day. So our last ones, if we're done with Mystic, is our survivors, Wendy and Ashcan.
Lucky.
Yeah, Lucky. I feel like there's a lot, actually.
We don't even need to defend it.
Yeah. If you can play Lucky.
Lucky, Flare.
Flare, yeah.
Lucky, Flare, Peter, Sylvester, depending on the builds. Cat Burglar is actually pretty good for Wendy.
Yes.
Yeah, super good.
What else? If you're running Leo DeLuca, it's pretty good.
Especially with Flare.
Yep, especially with Flare.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough one because out of all the classes we've talked about, I feel like there's the biggest difference between the two investigators in terms of
absolutely
Ashcan and Wendy, like what path you're going to take, and even if you're doing solo versus multiplayer.
Mm-hmm. I think Wendy also, if you want to play Wendy and friends, like Charisma is really decent, especially with Peter and Cat Burglar and Leo. Like, if you can get to that point where you have this critical mass of allies, some of the scenarios just turn really into cakewalks because you have so many abilities and pumps and everything like this. You do what you want when you want.
And then you play Dark Horse.
Yeah, exactly. Play Dark Horse, and it's just like
Darkwing Wendy.
So my stats are 6 across the board, and
in Wendy in particular, she's one where there's a high XP card that I aim for early, and that's the Will to Survive. That card is like, there's some of these bomb cards we talk about that's like, it'd be nice to have, but how often I'm going to use it? Like, I can name at least 4 or 5 games off the top of my head where Will to Survive like won me the game because it's just take your chaos bag, put it back in the box for a moment. You just succeed as long as you have the stats for it. It's
well, and that's just it. You're never waiting for will to survive to be worth it. You're never waiting for that moment. Like, literally every single game, there's at least one test that you wish you could have gone back and be like, man, if I just succeeded that one, like, forget all the others. So yeah, will to survive is definitely something to aim for, especially in a Wendy deck.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is your guys' experience with Wendy and Close Call?
I honestly don't think I have ever taken Close Call.
Yeah. I feel like Close Call, you've already evaded the enemy. It has to be non-elite, so you've already dealt with it, kind of. Like, shuffling it in, I don't know.
Yeah, I took it in the core campaign, and that was for a very specific reason, which is in the third scenario, you get in the situation at the end of the scenario where you're at one location, and if someone pops up, you can evade them, but you want to stay at that location and just keep doing your ritual thing.
Sure.
And so I added Close Call as a specific thing to avoid that situation, evade it, get rid of them. But now in Dunwich, yeah, I haven't taken it just because Wendy, for that reason, that there's not a very compelling scenario-specific reason, but also because she has more tools now. Like, I'm running Wendy solo now with Fire Axe and Dark Horse, and she can actually just straight up axe murder the weaker enemies and then evade the rest. So it's just not as much of an issue that I would spend the XP on it.
Jeez.
Sounds like a book I want to write, Orphan with a Fire Axe.
Fire Horse Wendy. It's real.
Fire Horse.
And Ashcan's like, upgrades? I need upgrades?
Yeah.
No doubt.
He doesn't just come
Pete.
upgraded? I'm confused.
Yeah.
His ability basically with starting with Duke in play is, I mean, Duke's a permanent, so it's like he's starting with like 5 XP. That's pretty much what it is. Really pretty much just everything on the Survivor side that we named for Wendy.
Yeah.
And then Charisma, because you've already got a free one of the best allies in the game. Why not stack it up?
Yeah.
Cool. So I think... Oh, any last thoughts on those?
No, Ashcan is just so like, well, same thing as Wendy, just better.
Well, here I am, being awesome,
Yeah.
per usual.
Cool. So we got through the all the gators. I guess there's just one final question before we move to tentacle time, which kind of popped up for me as we were talking. We didn't talk about the neutral upgrades much. So how much do you guys find yourselves using those versus the class-based ones?
Charisma, always.
Other than Charisma, really? Other than Charisma, I really don't. I think.
Charisma and Emergency Cash are the two, right?
Yeah.
That's C-play.
Yeah, I mean, I've upgraded to Quiche, I think, once or twice, but overall,
That's a late game upgrade.
Yeah.
For me.
Definitely. I tend to pick class cards before that. But Elder Sign Amulet or Bulletproof Vest, like, they might as well be unsleeved at this point. Like,
For real.
Yeah.
For real.
Charisma for sure. I think the only other one I take reliably now is, Elder Sign, and that's for specific investigators, as that pressure gets up there towards the middle of a campaign. Yeah.
Yeah, I find Cash, actually, if you're doing pretty good with Ashcan, getting Emergency Cash is actually decent because you get the resources to play all your stuff, but then you also draw a card. So it can be another card to Ready Duke. So that cantripping ability actually is decently important with Ashcan.
Now that you say that, I was just going to say, now that you say that, that's actually true for Wendy as well. She would like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say that it just sounds so weird to hear cash. Like, I literally have to stop and think about what card you're talking about because quiche is literally the word at the table. Like, it's emergency quiche. Like, that's what we say. So
I'm trying to get away from saying quiche because I heard quiche once.
Yeah.
So just stick with quiche.
Yeah.
It's got history. It's funny. Everybody loves it.
I'm upgrading emergency cash to emergency quiche. There you go.
Fine by me.
All right. Well, I really look forward to checking this out and how we feel maybe 2 cycles down the line, because I think what's interesting about where we sit now in the card pool is, honestly, as far as upgrades go, the breadth of what each investigator could hope to achieve from spending their XP. I mean, the card pool is so young. We don't have a whole lot by way of options yet. So I feel like this is going to be a very different discussion when we've got like 3 different options for increasing clue acquisition in Survivor.
Yeah.
And you know, things along those lines. So we definitely need to revisit this one at some time, TBD.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good talk, guys. Let's move on into Tentacle time. Scott, what's been grabbing you?
Been really busy the last little while, but I have been obviously keeping up with Arkham, starting Scott's ass. Rainbow Six Siege.
So you're saying your ass is keeping you busy?
I've been playing more Rainbow Six Siege just because it's super fun and there's new maps and all that stuff. But a certain television program recently came out with a new season, and it's Netflix. But House of Cards is by far the best show I've ever watched, ever. And the new season came out, and it's one of those shows that my wife and I, we're like, okay, we only watch this together. Like, there's no going ahead and like catching up or whatever. And this season is just unbelievable. And it's a, if anyone doesn't know, it's a political drama set in the States, and some of the things they do mirrors the current political climate. Just like they wrote this well before November, and just the way things are unfolding, I'm like, wow, this is just insane. So yeah, I've been watching House of Cards. That is my gaming time.
That's one that's on my to watch list. It's
good.
been there for a while. Which season did you say it was? Did you say
5 just came out.
5? God, that's been out for 5 years. I am super behind.
Yeah, you are. If you like Kevin
Yes,
Spacey
it's-
as an actor, he's absolutely incredible. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking, which makes it really super interesting, because he'll just look at the camera and talk to you, and at first it's really unnerving, but then it's like, oh wow, this is really cool. So there's one part in this season where he looks at the camera and like uses his fourth wall voice and says something, and then looks at a character in the show and says the exact same thing. Oh, it was beautiful. But anyways,
How does season 5
right, well.
stand up to previous seasons?
it was a bit slow to start, I gotta be honest. Like, the first episode or 2 didn't super grab me. I
Okay.
think I'm on episode 6 or 7 now, and I'm just like hook, line, and sinker. So first 2 episodes, not the best, but still great. But see, like episode 3 on, it just turns it up to 11.
Okay,
I-
cool.
Yeah, they might be at
I've-
15 by now. I don't know. Like,
Sure.
there's
Yeah, I've heard mixed things about 5 in comparison to previous seasons. For me, I still think 1 is the best. As with pretty much every television show ever, season 1 is usually the in my opinion, it's the best one. But like 2 was a good follow up. 3 was, in my opinion, the weakest for House of Cards.
really. I loved 3.
Oh, I did. That's not to say I didn't like it. I still watched it all and enjoyed it. But
I think 3 was my favorite, actually.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah.
You guys disagree too well. Come on!
Blood, we want blood.
I am Canadian.
And I'm a Minnesotan, so that's almost
All right.
Canadian.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're basically the Canada of the U.S.
Canada
Hate
light.
Canadian.
And we're also the California of the Midwest.
What?
Minnesota's
What
special,
the
guys.
hell? I didn't sign up for all this.
It's Canada 0.
All right, Ian, what you been up to?
My particular one is also in the realm of TV. I've been trying to catch up on a lot of shows that have been on my list and have succeeded in getting to a couple of them. The big one I'm going to talk about today is True Detective Season 1. for a long time I've heard how good it was, and I kind of put it off because I'm not a detective cop show type person. I definitely tend more towards like sci-fi fantasy things.
Wow.
But I had heard there are Mythos references and Carcosa references, and we have a certain deluxe expansion on the way, so I'm like, okay, let me just watch the thing. It is freaking amazing. That is one of the best seasons of television I've ever seen.
Yes.
The acting from Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey is just off the charts, and like there are the references to Carcosa and Yellow King, but if you're going into it thinking like Hastur is going to show up or something, like don't expect that. Like it's still a detective show about two detectives in Louisiana investigating these murders. But what I will say is within that context, like it does such a great job of evoking a Lovecraftian feel, even if like the subject matter is not monsters and stuff, if that I guess monsters of a certain kind. But just the kind of philosophies that are talked about, the feeling, the way they shoot the show, all that stuff really just, it just gets a certain mood in you. The only thing I'll say is, if you're in a low state of mind, don't watch this show because it'll make you pretty depressed for a while afterwards in some ways. But yeah, highly recommend it. Even if you're like me and like, it doesn't sound like something I would like because detectives in the title, watch it. It's good. It's worth it.
This is the Lovecraftian show / movie. Like I've wanted something like this so badly. That isn't just like Lovecraftian because it has Cthulhu in it or whatever. Like the fact that it's depicting for the most part like real life, quote unquote, not actual real life, obviously it's fictitious, but there's no monsters like you said, there's no supernatural elements to it. It's all stuff that you feel like you're watching like a super grimdark version of Law and Order or something like that. But the fact that it has like those references in it, like that is, to me, that's Lovecraftian horror. And so I love that this show exists, and that first season is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's so good. And I mean, for Arkham LCG fans, like you have two investigators and they definitely have their signature weaknesses. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, highly recommended for sure.
Definitely.
All right. Nick, how about you?
I've actually had, I've had a number of things that I wanted to talk about on Tentacle Time, but if I had my way, Tentacle Time would be a separate podcast where we just talk about everything we're doing. Been playing Bloodborne, which is awesome. Been doing a lot of stuff. But the one thing that I want to spend some time talking about is Dark Souls, the board game. Got that about a month ago or so, a little over a month ago, from the Kickstarter, finally fulfilled, and cracked it open. And I've played 4 games so far, which sounds like a low number, but this game is a lot longer than you expect. At least your first few games are. The box says 90 to 120 minutes. The first complete scenario I ran, like start to finish, took me about 4.5 hours. So, but as you familiarize yourself with the rules and the setup, and as you familiarize yourself with how, like, the rhythm of the game, you can cut that number down probably pretty close to the 2-hour mark. But I still think that 90 to 120 minutes is being very generous. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got it too, Ian. So my assessment of the game is solo is really easy, quote unquote easy, in that it's the easiest of the 4 difficulties. So basically, as you go through the game, you accumulate experience or souls, obviously. And in solo mode, they give you a bank of 16 souls to begin with. So you can start upgrading from the word go. But in 2, 3, or 4 player, you don't get any. So in my opinion, solo is the easiest, 2-player is the hardest. But I actually haven't played with anything more than 3 players at this point. I haven't done 4-player yet, so it'd be interesting to see that. But the engine, like the system is really good. It's really clean. I love it. I've been really itching for a good tactical minis, like dungeon delving game. Something that's a little cleaner than like Descent. Like Descent is a good game, but in my opinion, there's a lot of components in Descent that don't really need to be there. And by extension, Imperial Assault is pretty similar, where it's like there's a lot to this game and it uses everything, but I think they could have done it a bit cleaner or a bit more streamlined. And I think that Dark Souls kind of hits that nail on the head for me, where it's like, there's a lot to it, but it's not an overwhelming amount where you're flipping through multiple rule books trying to set up just one scenario. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or you're like, what does this one keyword mean that exists on 3 cards in this specific deck that I just happened to pick? Like, it's... but yeah, Dark Souls is great. The only criticism that I have for it, and Ian, I'd be interested to hear if you echo this at all, but it emulates the gameplay of Dark Souls, I would argue, almost perfectly. Like, it's a transition from video game to tabletop in gameplay form, like, is phenomenal. The whole having to farm for souls, having to manage your upgrades, having to, like, basically deciding your build based off of the items that you find, and then learning the behaviors of the boss and the behaviors of encounters, like, that is Dark Souls. But the problem is that, in my opinion, the most compelling thing about Dark Souls, the video game, is its narrative and how it delivers its narrative and the sense of exploration. And none of that exists in the board game, because it's only a tactical miniatures game, which is fine. Like, that's, you know, ultimately you couldn't recreate that experience in a satisfying way without completely changing the nature of the game. But I do wish that there was a bit more robust version of the campaign mode, or a bit of exploration or something to it. Ian, I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that it's, like, there have been kind of mixed reviews for the board game, and I would say, for the most part, it lives or dies for you on whether you just like the core combat, because that's what this game is. You're just fighting and fighting and fighting again, fighting some of the same enemies again. So if you don't like those core mechanics, like, there's not much there otherwise that's going to make you like it. There's, you know, don't expect, like, Arkham LCG type narratives or anything like that. Like, but if you do like it, which I happen to, then you end up liking the game quite a bit, especially the boss battles are super compelling for me, and trying to remember the patterns and figuring out the best strategies. Like, I think it's just a really good game in that aspect. It does take quite a bit of time, and when you're trying to juggle 2 freaking LCGs, it's hard to find 4 hours for a board game. But I'm glad it's in my collection, I guess I'll say it.
It's one that I am very excited to bring to our next gaming weekend, Sean, because it's one that I know Evan likes it. Evan and I played a game of it, and I think Kip will. I'm not 100% certain on you, Sean, simply because it's all about repeating scenarios and learning, and not that you don't like learning, but like learning patterns and learning behavior and optimizing that, which is right up my alley. I've said multiple times where when I lose to a game, my knee-jerk reaction is reset it, let's go again, let's do it again, let's fix this problem. And Dark Souls is all about that. And I know for sure that if Justin is at our next weekend, he'll probably play for a little bit and then just be done with it, because he's very much more about the fast-paced games that change from one turn to another, and not the ones that force you to repeat a section over and over again.
Yeah, I'll be interested too, because I think the thing that gives me pause about that game is the same reason I've never picked up one of the video games, is I have a salty streak about me. And sometimes I would much rather just go... Most of the time I'm gaming to relax or to escape, and sometimes that just doesn't always mean getting my face kicked.
But just like the video game, the board game has that moment where once you overcome that thing that you've been beating your face against ineffectually for so long, it feels amazing, and you're like, now I get it. Now I know how to do this. And then it becomes not trivial, but it becomes easier. I had a moment like that in Bloodborne recently, where an enemy that was like crazy, and I finally like overcame them. I'm like, now they're chumps, like whatever. So it's really fun. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested to try it. So, especially for how much hype that game got. Good lord.
Yeah.
Maybe that was just our Discord in my circle.
Well, I know I kept asking about it because I was worried if I would even see my copy after having moved right before they sent it out. So I kept, like, every couple days I'd be like, has anyone heard anything? Does anybody know? Has anyone heard back? But yeah, so great game.
I feel like the thing that's keeping me from that game, Nick, because I was really interested in it, is one, the price tag, like the initial one. It's an expensive game.
Yeah.
But 2, I looked on BGG for like, oh, they're coming out with expansions, and they already have like 25 expansions planned, and they're all like $30. I'm like, I'm a completionist. I'll lose my house. Like,
yeah,
and then I'll have to live in the box.
Seems fair.
Yeah, the number of expansions is attributed 110% to the success of the Kickstarter. Like, its Kickstarter was so good that they kept adding expansions, and we're like, we'll throw this boss in there, and we'll throw this boss in there. And I'm kind of a completionist, but at the same time, I'm like, well, the Dark Souls 2 stuff, I can wait until I have everything else, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, some of it definitely has a priority over others.
For me this week, I've been really busy the past couple weeks, as you know, is just kind of the theme now. But I was going to mention the new BioShock HD collection that I picked up and popped in and have been really enjoying. But BioShock's old. You've probably heard of it. If you enjoy it, you've probably already played it. So what I want to talk about right now is the new Dark Tower trailer. Because we haven't had a podcast. Yeah, okay, keep making noises. We're good. We haven't had a podcast.
Towergasm.
We haven't had a true tentacle time, I should say, since the trailer dropped. And Nick and I both went through this transformation.
It was an experience. Like 5 minutes.
Because we're both super into the books. And I know Scott is too, and Ian's currently reading through them. So if you want a book club, I'm sure we're going to mention it more than once in Tentacle Time as we go through. But I'm usually pretty good about letting books be books and movies be movies, and they just exist as separate entities, and not really be kind of that guy who's like, well, yeah, the elves weren't at Helm's Deep. But the trailer, while it looked amazing, and I love all the casting that has been done so far, I kind of walked away going, oh yeah, wow, they really, really, really changed the story. Like, I'm fine with little nitpicky things, but like they drastically changed the story. And then Nick and I were going back and forth on this, and then Nick, I think you I don't know how you came about it, but I found an article like right around the same time. And then, like, immediately as soon as I started reading this article, that it came to this realization for us that we can't spoil because it's like super endemic to the plot of the story. Nick messages me like, "Oh my god, what if blah 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 blah." And
so I was just gonna say, so Laura, my wife and I, we watched the trailer, and she knew how excited I was for this movie, and I just was so disappointed, and I voiced that. And as I'm talking about my disappointment, like she usually does, she finds an article, probably or very likely the same one, online. And she's like, well, apparently it's not an adaptation. I'm like, what? And then I think I can say this because it's in that article. It's like...
Well, hang on. Was it like an official article that people would see? I don't know.
Well, you saw it, and I saw it, so we're people.
Yeah, I know, but we've read the story though.
Well, okay, but, it's more. It can be considered more like a follow-up in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Like literally just those words turned my attitude about the movie around like 150%. Like I was like, "Yep, this is amazing," and so I got a hold of Sean like immediately afterwards, and we both like gushed about it from there on out.
Yep, because there's this very singular detail that was actually released in a tweet. So people had figured this out before the trailer had even hit, because in the run up and the hype on the movie, they released this tweet about this very specific thing that happens in the story, and that single reference just made everything snap into place. And it's like, oh shit, I am fully on board now. Let's have this movie. It can be as different as it needs to be, man. Let's do it. So yeah, Scott, have you? Well, we can almost do a Dark Tower podcast now, because the reason that we're leaving Scott out of this discussion is that detail.
Yeah.
Is actually in it's in
oh my God.
Yeah, right. It's in the epilogue of the 7th book of the Dark Tower series. And Scott, I don't know if you want to give the preamble to that epilogue and why you haven't actually read it when Nick and I have.
Sure. So without any spoilers, The book comes to a conclusion, we'll call it that, and then Stephen King kind of breaks the fourth wall in writing. I guess the fourth page. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, it's like a preface to the epilogue.
Yeah, and he basically says, "You can stop here. Like this can be the end of the story. Some people will want to know more. Please continue on." But I have to reread that preface because I'm pretty sure he says this is how he wanted it to end, but that he knows that fans would be like, "What? That's garbage." So I actually haven't read past that part. I've read the Gunslinger series 3 times, man. And the first time I read it was like 10 years ago-ish, and I've never done it. I'm just like, I want to stop here, but
that's impressive willpower.
I'm taking
really
damage
is.
hearing this.
But I think because I was so excited for this movie, and I saw the trailer, and I was like, WTF. So I think what I'm going to do is I am going to join Ian on his first trek through the books. I'll join him on my fourth. I'm setting up my little Kobo thing tomorrow, so I can read it at work and stuff. I'm going to join Ian for the trip, and I am going to read that last part of the book.
Well, you got some catching up to do because he's already on book 2 and like almost halfway through it from the sound of it.
That's fine. I have lots of free time at work, so.
And you know,
That
Scott,
helps, yeah.
that whole like, well, Stephen King says this is where he wants the story to end. I still call BS on that because if he really wanted the story to end there, he would have never ever written that last little bit. Like, it's it is this like that's part of it. You need it.
I can't even finish a sentence. No, but it's true, and you know, Scott, I know we've talked about this a lot, but I think people are afraid for a series that long to end,
Sure.
and how possibly could the ending be satisfactory.
Yeah.
But I think the way he ended it was absolutely perfect to what the setup was.
But you know what? I also feel like he ended it perfectly too. Like I am totally okay with the Dark Tower that I know.
Here's the thing, though.
Like
You're wrong. Mm-hmm. Like you're wrong. Like that's just the fact. You're wrong.
See, where was this disagreement earlier? Jeez, guys.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
Right? So I don't.
How can you not know?
Like
you need to know.
I don't know. I felt as with the way it ended before that epilogue, preface, whatever. I felt like, I know this is sounding really stupid. I felt at peace with the story. Like I was like, okay, I am done with the story, and I am okay to end it here. And so I reread it twice over the next couple years or whatever, to see if I wanted to read past that. But I was just so satisfied at that point.
Well, I'm super excited for when you do.
I will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'll be one heck of a technical time.
We can. Yeah, we will. We'll have a big ol' explosion in our mod chat, and yeah. So anyway, my technical time is a prop to the Dark Tower series because it is an amazing series. If you were like me and mistakenly, and I'm going to put this out there, you are making a mistake if you have written Stephen King off, having never read any of his books, as some kind of schlocky horror writer.
Mm-hmm.
So untrue. And the Dark Tower is a great place to start because you don't need to have any foreknowledge, even though the Dark Tower actually kind of intertwines some of his other works into it. Many of his other works.
I checked the Wikipedia, but I think it's that 48 of his other novels are hinted at in the Dark Tower series.
And I don't know that it relates specifically to people who enjoy Arkham, but anyone who just enjoys good fiction. Like, the Dark Tower, to me, it's the modern Lord of the Rings. It's such a cool genre melder.
It's the adult Lord of the Rings.
It's a quest novel. Yes. I mean, it's science, it's sci-fi, it's fantasy, it's modern action drama. Oh, so good. So anyway, if you haven't read it, go try it out. If the movie comes out, and I can't speak to the movie because we haven't seen it yet. The movie comes out, you enjoy that, go try it out. Well, yeah. Hey, I didn't see Matt was in our chat. Matt is here, and I'm kind of sad because Matt, you're gonna maybe hear this if you listen to it later. I bitched you out earlier and then immediately apologized. So just know that apology is forthcoming.
Wait, what? Did I miss something?
Aquina.
The misread of the great misreading of
yeah. Gotcha.
All right, so I think we'll put a button on it there, guys. Anything else to say before we close it out?
Read the Dark Tower series.
I was going to try and loop it back to the show topic, but yeah, read the Dark Tower.
Yeah, upgrade your life by reading the Dark Tower series.
Your first 7 experience goes to the Dark Tower series.
All right. Well, guys, if you have comments or questions or questions or comments, and you know what, we're just going to go ahead and hijack the Nerdist term here. If you have quements, call the Mythos Busters hotline at 203-493-MYTH. That's 203-493-6984. We'd love to hear from you. You can also contact us at mythosbusterspod@gmail.com, at mythosbusters on Twitter. Visit our podcast at mythosbusterspodcast.wordpress.com. Check us out on Facebook. Join our Discord, yo. Please join our Discord. It is such a fun and happening place to be. Great discussion always. That's discord.me/mythosbusters. And guys, we will go ahead and see you next time.
Whoa.
Wow, not a second.
Perfect timing.
Not a second too early. That is my alarm clock on weeknights to myself to stop being a dumbass and start going to bed.